and I'd like to welcome Krista Bailey, Glenda Musoba, Kelli, Peck, Parrott, and Ricardo Montelongo to join us for our next session, Navigating the Student Affairs Graduate School Application and Interview Process. Welcome all. So feel free for, I don't know who might be sharing your screen. You can do that now.
The screen right now. But thank you so much for having us. My name is Krista Bailey. I'm a clinical associate professor at Texas A&M University, and I'm the director of our NASPA program. I'm sorry, I shouldn't try to do two things at once. I'm the director of the SAHI program at Texas A&M University, and I appreciate NASPA providing us with this experience. I'll let my colleagues go ahead and introduce themselves. Maybe Kelli, you want to go first?
Sure. I am Kelli Peck Parrott, and I am a clinical full professor at the University of Florida and the interim director of the SPHE, or Student Personnel and Higher Education program there at the University of Florida.
Glenda?
Hello, I'm Glenda Musoba. I'm also at Texas A&M University. I'm an associate professor of higher education.
And Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
Good afternoon, everyone from Houston, Texas. I'm Rick Montelongo, and I'm an assistant professor in ed leadership, teaching in our higher ed administration program, soon to be associate professor come the fall semester.
Congratulations. Well, we're excited to be with you this afternoon and talk about navigating the graduate school application interview process. We're going to do kind of a rapid fire. Here are some things to think about. What we're going to talk about today is give you a little bit of information to start thinking about the many different types of graduate programs that are available, talk about the application process, the different types of interviews or conferences that you might be invited to participate in. Give an opportunity if there are any questions, and then if time allows, we'll share some best practices since all of us are involved in the admissions process for graduate admissions. So as you think about the different types of programs that there are, it's like going to a grocery store and going in those aisles and looking at like the 15 different types of peanut butters, and you know, that you could get creamy or crunchy or whatever, but there's just so many different options that are available. And so one of the things that we think about is what kind of a learner are you? And so what do you really need as you're thinking about that graduate program, whether it be a master's program or a doctoral program? Do you need to be face-to-face with people? Are you looking for a short program, a long program, because the length matters and makes a difference? Do you want a cohort where you have a shared experience with a group of students? Or would you rather have a non-cohort type experience? Do you want to have a graduate assistantship? Are you going to go full-time or part-time? How important is funding? Because there are some programs that provide different types of funding available. Then what's the curriculum? So what are you really hoping to learn? At the end of that graduate program, what is the new knowledge and skills and abilities that you want to have to be better prepared for the next step of your career? And then which programs are going to provide that for you? And there's lots of different resources out there to help you find graduate programs. Some of them are your mentors, the people that you work with, faculty members. It's about reaching out and gaining information. There's a graduate program directory through NASPA. So lots of different opportunities, but ultimately you really have to decide what kind of a learner am I and where am I going to learn best?
And this is where I come in. And I think, I don't know if I said my institution, I'm at St. Houston State University here in Huntsville, Texas. I'll go over real quickly about the application process. And the one thing I just want to say is, when you go into the application for programs, do your research. You're going to find out that the application process varies from program to program. For example, some may have a deadline, say like in December. Some may have rolling deadlines, much like my program at Sam Houston, where we accept a fall, winter, a fall, spring, and summer cohort. And so do your research and look at when those deadlines and how the process looks for your specific program. One thing that you will find out that there are similarities across programs. There's probably some type of institutional graduate school application that's part of the application. We'll definitely ask for all transcripts. And so when you go in and start the process, be sure to contact all the institutions you attended, because we're likely going to ask for it. Letters of recommendation, which I'll talk about in the next slide, and also the personal statement. The personal statement definitely is one of the key pieces of your application. Don't rush through it. I think, due to time, I'm hoping that we'll have time to talk about the importance of the personal statement, but just know that that is definitely part of the overall process, and that should be something that you take time to complete. Now, talking about letters of recommendation. When you do letters of recommendation, make sure you are contacting individuals that can attest not only to your experience, but I know as part of our admissions committee for our fully online program, for me in particular, and I could say the same for my colleagues at Sam Houston, we're also looking at the experience that you bring that can transfer into higher ed settings. So if you have a letter of recommendation, say from, I don't know, say from one of your professors, or, we even get letters of recommendation from teachers and other non-higher ed folks, be sure that they can also talk about your experience, skills that you can bring that can be applicable in higher ed settings. And also find letters of recommendation, recommenders who can also describe your commitment, both academic commitment and professional commitment, because those people can give us information on your desire for the degree and how that will carry over once the degree is done. And so be sure to find good recommenders for those letters of recommendation. They can be actual letters or they can be forms. And again, this is where you have to do research on the application process for your specific program. Test scores. Now, this is where things get interesting, especially over the past, I would say, probably 2 years or so. Look at resources such as NASPA and other professional organization websites. Those are usually good resources to find the most current information on the programs throughout the nation. Programs are moving towards a not having GRE scores and things like that. And so be sure to look at websites, look at professional organizations for the most current requirements when it comes to test scores and requirements. Several programs such as Indiana University and Sam Houston has removed the GRE requirements. And the reason why, just FYI, is, there's other indicators such as the personal statement, your transcripts, and other sources of information that can give us good quality insights and skills needed for success. And so do your research. Some programs still have GRE requirements and testing, some don't. And so again, I refer to the professional organizations and the specific websites of the programs to get the most current requirements.
Okay, and I would agree with Dr. Montelongo. University of Florida just removed their GRE requirement because we looked at it as a means that we really weren't using as much as the rest of the application. So as he was just describing, that means each and every piece of the application and the application process becomes even more important. So that leads us to interviews and interview conferences. Different programs, depending on the program and their needs and what they're looking for, as Dr. Bailey was talking about earlier, will require different things in terms of interviews and conferences. For some programs that may be wholly online and looking for and maybe geared more toward more experienced professionals, they may have an online interview. For other more traditional programs where it's a program that typically students are straight out of their bachelor's degree and coming on campus to go to school full-time for 2 years, you may see an interview conference, especially if they don't have a rolling admissions. If they're cohort-based and they select once a year, they often have what we call an interview conference. And during that conference, they will invite you on campus, and it will vary. For some of them, it may be 1 day, 2 days, and so forth. But the point is to be in a coordinated effort to give you a chance to see campus, to interview for graduate assistantships, and then maybe perhaps even to interview for an academic interview with the faculty as all part of their selection process. Other programs across the country may offer you admission. They'll look at all your application materials and they may say, we're going to offer you admission contingent upon whether or not you get selected for an assistantship. And so they might have interview conference days, but the real thrust of those interview conference days are not whether or not you get selected by the academic program and there won't be an academic interview, but more so just setting up your graduate assistantship interviews and seeing if you get selected through that process. These interviews can vary. They can be a half an hour to an hour long with graduate assistantship supervisors. They can be face-to-face, like I said, through an interview conference, or they may be online. One of the things that I noticed last year in the interview process that was a little bit disconcerting for students as they were trying to select different types of programs was understanding why are there some programs that will allow them to interview for assistantships online and why are there some programs that won't. Some programs, particularly the more traditional full-time 2-year cohort-based programs, tend to like to have students come on campus to get a feel for it, to see if that's a fit, and also because they want another chance to see you. Things to keep in mind about that is, and I'm kind of skipping ahead, the purpose of the visit is for you to get a feel of the campus, for you to see if this is a fit, and to get and put your best foot forward for a great graduate assistantship. But it's also a chance for the programs to take a look at you and to see if you're a fit and them to piece together the best group that they can to be students in their program. Keep in mind your professionalism. From the time you step out of your door to go to an interview conference or sit down to your computer to have your interview, from the time it's clicked off or the time you get home from that interview conference, be professional. Have your professional foot forward. Know that especially these campus visits and interview conferences, you really are interviewing the whole time you're there. They want you. They're going to try their best to put their best foot forward, but keep in mind that they're watching you too, and so you want to do the best you can. Cost of these interview conferences will vary. Some programs charge, and that's a way that they're able to fund them. Some programs have the benefit of having financial assistance and a good partnership with their divisions of student affairs and do not. Take a good, strong look as they invite you to the interview conference. Review their materials. See what's paid for and what's not. Commonly, many places who do more traditional programs, traditional conferences, will either charge a fee or not, but once you arrive on campus, your meals and so forth, and they'll let you house with students, current students, to give you, again, more of a feel for the program. But once you pay that initial fee, then your expenses are largely taken care of. But it varies by program. That's information you want to know and look for ahead of time. You also want to know about your flights and your travels. Most programs will not be able to pay for you to come to their program or come to their campus for the interview conference.
All right, well, that gives you kind of a big, broad overview of the major steps involved in the application process for graduate schools. And so we wanted to open it up and see if there are any questions. You could use the chat box if you have questions that we could potentially address, or jump in to the call if you have specific questions.
Thank you all so much for your time today. We greatly appreciate it. I think one of the questions that has come through for us, it's been on everyone's mind, is how you see this process changing, evolving, or adapting in the world of COVID-19.
That's a great question. Who wants to take Dr. Musoba, you want to start?
I don't think anybody has the answer to that question, but I will share some thoughts about it. I know for our program, our students traditionally do a summer internship between the first and second year. And some of those internships are changing drastically or are in jeopardy. So that's something you want to look at in terms of what will happen to my summer between the programs. In terms of if we're in the same state we're in now, next spring, we may not do our traditional in-person interview conference. Right now we're planning to, but that's because we hope to be approaching normal at that point. We're teaching online this summer, So in terms of, we finished the semester out online and we're teaching online for the summer, and that's not traditional for our program. I know it is for Sam Houston and some other programs, but there's a lot of uncertainty. Anybody want to add anything?
I guess I would just echo that. I think, you know, this COVID-19 experience is expanding all of our previous limitations, our previous conceived notions on what is an interview conference and what does that need to have happen. And as we're watching our colleagues adapting admissions, you know, offices adapting their orientations and so forth, I think, you know, it's highly likely that we will adapt as well in trying to see and look at, okay, can we take this electronically? We just recently had a candidate for a faculty position, and because of COVID-19, we had to do a traditional 2-day interview that would be on campus and try to recreate that electronically. And we were surprisingly able to do that. I think as time goes by, we might get more sophisticated in terms of meetings and socials and, you know, tours and that sort of thing to give potential candidates a better perspective of the campus. But I think it's one thing where we've got to question and say, you know, even if we're not under the same constraints, does it make sense? Does it make sense to do it differently? So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. Luckily, we've got, for many of us, we've got nearly a year to try to adapt and get prepared.
And I'll just end real quickly. You know, Sam Houston State University is a fully online program. And so everything that we do as part of our program is done online and virtually. You know, I would tell my colleagues and anybody interested in any program is that, yes, there's challenges with creating, you know, what we're commonly familiar with in terms of like the face-to-face. But, you know, one thing that Sam Houston does that we share with our colleagues is, you know, advice and strategies to create what I call a high-impact online learning experience. And that carries over to the outside of class, quote unquote, experience. Sam Houston, we have what we call virtual coffee houses. You know, we do Zoom synchronous meetings, but we also do Zoom just plain, you know, fellowship type meetings. And so, you know, we're obviously we're going to hope that things get back to what we're familiar with. But in the meantime, you know, there is some possibilities in online education. I'm the internal optimist that I think several of my colleagues are realizing what can be done if you think creatively and outside the box. But yeah, you know, I'll tell my colleagues, you know, we support each other, and I hope that carries over to everything that we do in addition to teaching.
Great, thank you. And it looks like we've had a question come through in the chat. My GPA isn't quite up to standard for applying to grad school, and I'm planning to take post-baccalaureate classes in the fall in order to bring it up to apply for grad school. For grad schools with application deadlines in December, will they take that into account with me taking those classes even though I don't have grades for those classes yet? Or should I wait until next year to apply once I have those grades and a higher GPA?
I'll take a first stab at answering that. I know for our program, we look at the student holistically, and particularly in terms of GPA, we look at their last 60 credits. We know that sometimes folks have an adjustment period to college. And so we're looking at the courses when you're more in your major, doing the things you love to study. And so we would consider GPA in the context of your experience and the other factors in your application, your personal statement. In terms of you're taking the courses, yes, you won't have the grades. So if your GPA is really low and you're applying to a very selective program, it might be worth waiting. But we're a selective program, modestly selective program, or mid-range, I would say, in selectivity. And we haven't always taken only students with really high GPAs if they have the experience and the passion for the profession and probability of being successful. Anybody want to add?
I would add, this is where your personal statement is really important. you know, if there's some sort of challenge that you face that is reflective of that GPA, don't let that opportunity pass you over if you don't state that in a personal statement, because, you know, all we have to work with is what you provided to us. But if your personal statement gives some kind of description, reasons why that is, and for me, just reading your question, adding that, hey, I'm doing my best to improve that GPA, I'm doing this, post back and stuff. I'm reading that as, well, you know, this candidate is, you know, again, that commitment that I mentioned earlier. There's something to be said, and let's possibly look at this candidate further or give that candidate an opportunity. But if your personal statement doesn't say anything, you know, I'll just leave it at that.
I would also add to, you know, look closely at the programs you're applying to. Some of them will say on their websites and so forth if they have an absolute cutoff. So if they have an absolute cutoff of a minimum GPA and you don't meet that standard, then, you know, that might be one you would consider not wasting the money that it might cost for the application and so forth. So I would take a good look at where you're applying. The other thing I would do is to really control those things that you can control. Your GPA is what it is. There's probably not a whole lot you could do about that except for taking a year and taking additional classes to try to bring that up. But really, there's not much you can do about it. But you can control your personal statement. You can have a high influence over your letters of recommendation and your resume and other pieces. So take control of what you can and really make sure that you're putting as much effort into that. I can't tell you, and I think my colleagues will attest to it, how often we'll get a personal statement that will have typos. And it's obvious the person didn't even run spell check. So take control of what you can, get people to read those materials for you and really help judge them, and do the best you can on what you can control.
Thank you, everybody. We do have a few more questions. So for those of you who are able to stay on to answer them, we'd love to continue to hear your thoughts on this. One of the questions that has come in is, would I be better prepared for this program or type of program after a few years of working on campus to get real life experience, or should I pursue this right after I graduate from undergrad?
I'll start and then let people chime in with other thoughts. I think it depends on the person. So, and maybe the program. There are certainly some programs that are more designed for students who are currently working in the field. And so if that's the case, then maybe getting a job on campus in higher education and then spending a year or two in that and then starting a program may be a good way to do it. And I guess it may also, so I think it depends on that. I think it depends on what you want to do. So what's your end goal? Like, what's the purpose of getting the degree? We have students in our program who've done both. I think they both bring differing perspectives to the conversation and to the classroom. I sometimes find that students who have taken some time away from their undergraduate experience come to graduate school with a different kind of approach maybe to learning and taking in the knowledge in a different way because they're able to apply it to the full-time experience that they had, because being a graduate student, being a student affairs educator is quite different than being a student leader. And so they've already gone through that part of the transition. Anything else you all would add?
If you're coming straight from an undergrad, definitely highlight, you know, your leadership experiences, things that can be applied to a program like higher ed administration, student affairs, and again, you know, highlight that in the personal statement or a resume. Just don't let that valuable information just be hidden. You know, we get several candidates every application where they're coming straight from the undergraduate experience, and that's what we look at. Is, you know, what is their leadership and things like that.
I would add, don't be afraid to go straight from undergrad into a grad program, but pick a grad program that has lots of internships, graduateships. Sometimes we call internships practicum, but you want to be competitive on the market after graduating. You need to have that experience either before you go into school or while you're in school. and I can only speak for our program, but our students graduate with a couple of practicum experiences plus a graduate assistantship. So those experiences make them marketable.
Was there any other questions?
I think that is all that we have for today. Thank you all so much for your time and for sharing your expertise with us. We hope that this helps some of our SA grads that are navigating the search. So thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Here's our contact information. I know that any of us would be willing to talk to anyone who has further questions about the process, because I think that's important to reach out, get information from the schools that you're interested in. That's always a good strategy to use.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
You too. Thanks for the opportunity.